The pale aspen dawn filtered through the slatted blinds of my rented apartment, painting stripes of hesitant light across the polished wood floor. Outside, the air held the crisp promise of a perfect mountain day, the kind of day meant for celebrations, for beginnings. Today was supposed to be Jake's beginning. My little brother. I'd driven 12 hours from the coast, navigating winding mountain roads, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a sense of obligation that felt older than I was. Jake was getting married. Married into the Bennett family, whose name was practically synonymous with the old money elegance of this resort town. It was the kind of match our mother, bless her eternally optimistic heart, had probably dreamed of since Jake first learned to charm his way into an extra cookie. I checked my tie in the reflection of the dark microwave door. Dark suit, crisp white shirt, muted silver tie. Appropriate. Invisible. The uniform of the supportive older brother, a role I'd inhabited for most of my 34 years, especially since Dad passed. Dad, who had always seen the fissures beneath Jake's polished surface. My phone buzzed on the granite countertop, a jarring intrusion into the quiet morning. Unknown number. Usually I'd ignore it, another spam call promising riches or warning of imaginary tax audits. But something, a prickle of unease I couldn't quite name, made me pick it up. It wasn't a call. It was a text. Stark white letters against the black screen. Don't trust the facade Jake shows today. Watch closely. That was it. No signature, no explanation. Just 6 words hanging in the digital air, heavy as unspoken truths. My thumb hovered over the delete button. A prank. A wrong number? Maybe a disgruntled ex of Jake's stirring trouble? He'd left a trail of those, like discarded candy wrappers. But the message didn't feel malicious, not exactly. It felt cautionary. Like a whisper in a crowded room meant only for my ears. Facade. The word snagged in my mind. Jake had always worn facades. The charming younger son, the ambitious go-getter, the devoted fiancé. He shifted between them with an ease that sometimes bordered on unsettling. Which facade was the anonymous messenger warning me about? A familiar dread, cold and unwelcome, began to uncoil in my gut. It was the same feeling I used to get as a kid when Jake would spin elaborate lies to get out of trouble, leaving me to absorb the fallout. The feeling that beneath the smooth surface, something was fundamentally misaligned. I reread the message. Watch closely. All right, anonymous messenger. Message received. I wouldn't just play the supportive brother today. I would watch. This perfect aspen wedding, bathed in the glow of wealth and expectation, suddenly felt less like a celebration and more like a stage. And I had a front row seat, whether I was officially invited to it or not. The knot of obligation tightened, but now it was laced with a thread of apprehension, sharp and metallic. Today wasn't just Jake's beginning. It felt like something else entirely. An ending, perhaps. Or maybe, just maybe, a reckoning. I saved the message, the stark white letters burning themselves onto the back of my eyelids. The perfect day suddenly felt fragile, like thin ice over dark water. The Aspen Meadows Lodge loomed ahead, a sprawling monument to rustic luxury built from massive timbers and native stone. Valets in crisp uniforms moved with practiced efficiency, whisking away gleaming SUVs and sedans. The air buzzed with the low murmur of expensive chatter and the faint scent of pine and wood smoke from the grand fireplace I could glimpse through the soaring lobby windows. It was impressive, designed to project effortless wealth and exclusivity. I pulled my modest sedan into the designated guest parking, bypassing the valet circus. Walking towards the entrance, smoothing the lapels of my suit jacket, I felt a familiar twinge, the subtle but persistent feeling of being slightly out of place, a well-dressed imposter in a world Jake navigated with predatory ease. Inside, the lobby was a controlled whirlwind of activity. Guests in designer attire drifted towards the designated wedding wing, their laughter echoing against the high-beamed ceilings. A young woman with professionally cheerful eyes and an impeccable blonde chignon stood behind a polished oak lectern, presiding over the guest list. A small, tasteful sign read, "Bennett Evans Wedding." I approached, offering a polite smile. "Dan Evans," I said, keeping my voice even. Her smile, bright and practiced, faltered for just a fraction of a second. A tiny flicker in her eyes, quickly masked. "Evans?" she repeated, her manicured finger tracing down the alphabetized list printed on heavy cream cardstock. The paper rustled slightly under her touch. She scanned the E section once, then twice. Her brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. "I'm sorry, sir. Could you spell that for me?" "Evans, I spelled it out, the letters feeling thick and clumsy on my tongue. "Dan Evans, the groom's brother." Her finger stopped. She looked up, the professional cheerfulness replaced by a careful neutrality that felt colder than outright hostility. "Ah," she said, her voice a little too bright. "I do apologize. It seems there might have been a slight oversight." She avoided my gaze, her eyes darting towards a seating chart elegantly displayed on an easel beside her. "Your name isn't currently on the main guest list." The air conditioning suddenly felt icy against my skin. "Not on the list?" I echoed, my voice quieter than I intended. "There must be a mistake. I'm his brother." "Yes, of course," she murmured, flipping a page on her clipboard, a separate, much shorter list. "We have... yes. Instructions were that if you arrived, you could be... accommodated." She paused, clearly uncomfortable. "There's space available near the West Terrace entrance by the cloakroom." Near the cloakroom, not inside the grand hall with its vaulted ceilings and panoramic mountain views. Not even at a secondary table in the main area. Near the coats. The message wasn't just an omission, it was a deliberate placement. An exile to the periphery. The anonymous text echoed in my mind. Don't trust the facade. The facade of brotherly love, of family unity. It was already cracking. The receptionist offered another tight, apologetic smile. "Shall I show you the way?" "No," I said, the word clipped. The initial shock was hardening, crystallizing into something sharp and cold inside my chest. This wasn't an oversight, this was a statement. "Thank you. I'll find it." Betrayal wasn't a strong enough word. This was a calculated erasure, and the day had barely begun. My resolve, previously just a flicker of defiance sparked by an anonymous text, began to take shape, fueled by the cold, hard reality of being intentionally pushed aside. I wasn't just going to watch anymore. I was going to understand why. The main banquet hall was everything the hushed tones of the resort promised. Soaring ceilings crisscrossed with heavy wooden beams, floor-to-ceiling windows framing breathtaking vistas of snow-dusted peaks, and tables draped in ivory linens glittering with crystal and silver. The air hummed with polite conversation and the clinking of champagne flutes. It smelled of expensive perfume, hothouse flowers, and money, old and new, mingling uncomfortably. I found my designated spot easily enough. It wasn't even a table, just a single high-top cocktail table tucked into an alcove near the service doors leading to the West Terrace, and, inevitably, the cloakroom. It offered a clear view of the back of the coat rack and a sliver of the main hall if I craned my neck. It felt less like accommodation and more like quarantine. I leaned against the wall, nursing a glass of water I'd procured myself from a passing server, trying to project an air of nonchalant waiting. Guests continued to arrive, greeting each other with air kisses and practiced smiles. I saw aunts, uncles, cousins, people who had known me since I was a child, sweep past, their eyes flicking towards me with momentary confusion before settling back into the festive flow, perhaps assuming I was waiting for someone or simply preferred the solitude. No one approached. No one questioned my exile. No one. It was easier, I supposed, to accept the anomaly than to confront it. Presently, the lights dimmed slightly, and a hush fell over the room. The designated master of ceremonies, a slick local personality whose overly white teeth gleamed under the spotlights, stepped up to the podium positioned near the head table where Jake sat beaming beside his bride-to-be, Amelia Bennett. Our mother was seated nearby, radiating nervous pride. The MC launched into his welcome, his voice smooth and amplified. He welcomed the Bennetts, lauded their standing in the community, welcomed the Evans contingent, such as it was, represented primarily by our mother and Jake, and then began the customary acknowledgments. We must, of course, extend a special thank you to those who have nurtured and supported Jake throughout his life, the MC boomed, gesturing vaguely towards our mother. To his wonderful mother, Carol, whose unwavering belief has been a guiding light. Polite applause rippled through the hall. Mom dabbed at her eyes, beaming. He continued, and naturally, we remember Jake's late father, Greg, whose spirit is surely with us today, so proud of the man his son has become. More applause, a respectful murmur. I felt a pang, sharp and sudden. Dad wouldn't be proud, not of this calculated charade. The MC then pivoted to mentors, influential figures, even mentioning a beloved childhood pet Jake once had. The list went on. He thanked early teachers, college roommates, key figures from Jake's burgeoning career apparently brokered by the Bennetts. Each name was met with appreciative murmurs. And then, nothing. He moved on, transitioning to anecdotes about the happy couple. My name was never mentioned. Dan Evans, the brother who'd stepped into the void left by our father's premature death, who'd deferred his own plans to help Mom keep the house afloat, who'd mentored Jake through high school and college applications, who'd lent him money he never repaid for that first business venture, that Dan Evans apparently didn't warrant a mention. It wasn't just being seated near the Coates, it was being erased from the narrative altogether. The public nature of the omission stung more than the placement. It was a deliberate signal to everyone present. He doesn't matter. I watched faces in the crowd. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. Most simply smiled on, oblivious or indifferent. The humiliation wasn't hot and flushing. It was cold and clarifying. The facade wasn't just cracking. Jake was actively dismantling it himself, piece by deliberate piece, right here in front of everyone. The image of the loving, unified family was a carefully constructed lie, and I was the inconvenient truth being swept under the rug, or rather, banished to the cloakroom alcove. The question wasn't just why anymore. It was what else was he hiding? Leaving the stifling formality of the hall, I sought refuge in the lodge's sprawling bar area. Dark wood, leather armchairs, a low-lit ambiance. It felt miles away from the strained brightness of the reception. I ordered a scotch, neat, needing the burn to counteract the chill that had settled deep in my bones. I was swirling the amber liquid, watching the light refract through the heavy crystal tumbler, when a familiar voice cut through the low hum of conversation. Dan. Man, I thought that was you lurking near the coat check. I looked up. Tyler Vance stood there, a wry smile playing on his lips. Tyler and I went way back. High school, a few ill-advised road trips, the kind of shared history that forged a bond stronger than infrequent contact could erode. He was here as a friend of one of Amelia Bennett's cousins, a tenuous connection, but enough to get him past the front gate, unlike me. Lurking is one word for it, I replied, gesturing vaguely back towards the hall. Apparently my invitation specified prime code-adjacent seating. Tyler's smile faded, replaced by a look of genuine concern. He pulled up a stool beside me. Seriously? What the hell, man? You're Jake's brother. That seems to be a point of some contention today, I said dryly, taking a sip of scotch. The warmth spread through my chest, but didn't reach the core chill. Tyler leaned closer, lowering his voice. Look, Dan, maybe it's none of my business, but things seem off with Jake. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. I overheard him a couple of weeks ago, Tyler continued, swirling his own drink, a craft beer of some sort. At a pre-wedding thing. He was talking to someone, didn't see who, but he was really laying into the Bennetts, not Amelia specifically, but her parents. Griping about their money, how controlling they were, how he felt like he was constantly jumping through hoops. Tyler paused, frowning. It struck me as weird, you know. Sounded pretty bitter for a guy about to marry into the family. He took a swig of beer. And earlier today, just before the ceremony started, I saw him duck into a side office. He was on his phone, looked furious. Pacing back and forth, real agitated. Couldn't hear what he was saying, but the vibe was intense. Way too intense for wedding day jitters. My grip tightened on my glass, Jake bad-mouthing the Bennetts. An angry, secret phone call? It painted a picture starkly different from the beaming groom persona. Did you happen to see who he was meeting later, maybe near the kitchens? I asked, keeping my tone casual, recalling the anonymous text's advice. Watch closely. Tyler thought for a moment. Near the kitchens? No, didn't see that. But hey, he added, meeting my eyes directly. If you need someone to keep an ear out, let me know. Something feels hinky about this whole setup. An ally. Unexpected, but welcome. Tyler wasn't just offering platitudes. He was confirming my own unease, validating the warnings prickling beneath my skin. He saw the inconsistencies too. Thanks, Tyler, I said, the words carrying more weight than usual. I appreciate that. Let's just say, I'm starting to think today is more complicated than just a wedding. His gaze held mine, understanding passing between us without further words. The anonymous text had been a spark. Jake's actions had been kindling. Now, Tyler's observations felt like the first breath of oxygen hitting the embers. The chill inside me remained, but now it felt less like passive hurt and more like the cold focus before decisive action. Armed with Tyler's observation about Jake's agitated phone call and my own gnawing suspicion, I felt a pull towards the less glamorous parts of the venue. The service corridors, the loading docks, the kitchens, places where facades tend to slip under pressure. Tyler had mentioned Jake seemed furious earlier. Perhaps the source of that fury, or its recipient, was still lingering. Remembering the layout from a previous visit years ago for some Bennett corporate retreat I'd reluctantly attended with Dad, I navigated away from the main guest areas. The plush carpets gave way to utilitarian tile, the scent of expensive floral arrangements replaced by the faint smell of industrial cleaner and cooked food. The murmur of the crowd faded, replaced by the clatter of dishes and the muffled shouts of kitchen staff. I found the service corridor leading towards the back kitchens and loading bay. It was dimly lit, lined with stacked chairs and folded banquet tables, and then I heard voices, hushed, urgent tones filtering from around a corner, near a heavy steel door marked Dry Storage. Absolutely cannot afford any mistakes now, Linda. Not after everything. That was Jake's voice, tight with controlled tension, the smooth charm completely absent. I know, Jake, I know. But are you sure this is foolproof? Ben seemed hesitant, signing those last papers. That was a woman's voice, lower, conspiratorial. Linda. The name clicked. A family friend Jake had introduced to Mom months ago. Someone who always seemed slightly too eager, too watchful. I flattened myself against the cool cinder block wall, barely breathing, straining to hear. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. I discreetly activated the voice recorder, angling the phone slightly towards the sound. Hesitant? Jake scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. Ben's naive. A bit of pressure, the right reassurances. They always fold. Besides, the prenup is ironclad. That's secured. There was a pause. This marriage, Linda, it's not about romance. It's a necessary step. A springboard. With the Bennett name and access to their resources, those minor financial embarrassments I mentioned, they disappear. Poof. Minor financial embarrassments. The phrase hung in the air, reeking of understatement. My mind flashed back to the string of failed ventures, the frantic calls for loans, the vague excuses. Linda's voice was laced with admiration, or perhaps just greed. You really pulled it off, Jake. Right under their noses. It's about survival, Linda. Jake's voice dropped lower, colder. Securing my future. Ben. Ben is the key to that future. Sweet, trusting Ben. As long as I play the part, everyone gets what they want, especially me. My blood ran cold. The overheard conversation wasn't just about bad-mouthing the in-laws or pre-wedding jitters. It was a cold-blooded admission. The marriage was a calculated transaction, a means to an end. Financial salvation built on deceit, using Ben Bennett as collateral. The anonymous warning, the exclusion, the public erasure, it all snapped into horrifying focus. This wasn't just about slighting me. It was about protecting a much larger, darker secret. Footsteps approached from the other end of the corridor. They quickly stopped the recording, pocketed my phone, and melted back towards the main hall just as a kitchen porter pushed a rattling trolley past the dry storage door. I leaned against the wall for a moment, heart pounding, the recorded words echoing in my ears. Securing my future. Ben is the key. I had it now. Direct confirmation. Undeniable proof of the rot beneath the polished surface. The question wasn't just what else he was hiding. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The cold focus intensified, sharpening to a razor's edge. Later, as the afternoon sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and bruised purple, the official photographer started orchestrating the family portraits out on the manicured lawn overlooking the valley. Clusters of relatives posed, smiled, and rearranged themselves under the photographer's cheerful direction. Eventually, the call came for the immediate family. That meant Jake, Amelia, her parents, Arthur and Eleanor Bennett, radiating stiff propriety, and our mother, fluttering nervously beside Jake, and presumably, me. I approached the designated spot near a picturesque stone archway draped in white roses. Jake, looking every bit the happy groom again, beamed at Amelia. Mother fussed with Jake's boutonniere. The Bennetts stood like statues carved from expensive granite. Okay, wonderful, the photographer chirped. Groom's brother, if you could just step in here right beside your mom. I moved to stand beside Mom, offering her a small, tight smile she didn't return, her focus entirely on Jake. We shuffled into position. The photographer raised his camera. Jake murmured, tilting his head as if assessing a complex artwork. It feels a little cramped on this side. Mom, maybe swap with Dan. Give Amelia a bit more breathing room? Mom readily agreed, shuffling past me. Now I was on the outer edge, beside Arthur Bennett, who smelled faintly of cigars and disapproval. "Perfect," the photographer said, but then paused again. "Actually, Mr. Evans," he said, addressing Arthur, "could you angle slightly more towards your daughter? And Jake, maybe step just a hair closer to Amelia?" As they shifted, Arthur Bennett subtly angled his shoulder, creating less space. Jake, stepping closer to Amelia, simultaneously nudged me slightly outwards with his elbow, a movement so small, so seemingly accidental, it was almost imperceptible. Almost. "Right," the photographer frowned, peering through his lens. "Still a bit tight on the end there. Dan, terribly sorry, mate. Could you perhaps just step slightly back for this one? We'll get one with just you and Jake later, promise." Step back. Out of the frame. The request was polite, apologetic, but the intention, guided by Jake's subtle choreography, was crystal clear. First the guest list, then the speech, now the symbolic family portrait. A consistent, calculated campaign of exclusion. I saw a flicker of triumph in Jake's eyes as he turned back towards the camera, his arm possessively around Amelia's waist. Mom beamed, oblivious. The Bennetts maintained their stoic facade. "No problem at all," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. I took a deliberate step back, removing myself entirely from the composition. Let them have their perfect picture. I knew what it was truly worth. I stood aside, watching them smile for the camera, the happy, united family. The image was a lie, a carefully constructed illusion, and I was no longer willing to be even a blurry figure in its background. My stoicism wasn't passive acceptance, it was the hardening of resolve. Each slight, each calculated push wasn't breaking me. It was forging something stronger, colder. Let Jake build his facade. I was collecting the pieces he discarded, the evidence of its falseness, and soon, the foundation would crumble. Dinner was served as dusk fully settled, the grand hall bathed in the warm glow of chandeliers and candlelight. I remained at my outpost near the cloakroom, politely declining offers from servers attempting to usher me towards the main seating area, claiming I was waiting for someone. The isolation felt deliberate now, a space I chose rather than one I was forced into. From my vantage point, I could observe the room. Jake was playing the gracious host, moving between tables, laughing easily, charming Amelia's relatives. He avoided my section of the hall entirely. Tyler caught my eye from across the room and gave a subtle shake of his head, a silent acknowledgement of the ongoing charade. It was during a lull between courses that a man I'd never seen before approached my solitary table. He was about my age, dressed sharply but with a slightly too loud tie, and had an air of forced bonhomie. "Danny Evans, is that really you?" he exclaimed, extending a hand with perhaps a bit too much enthusiasm. "Mike Johnson. Remember? Econ 101, Professor Davies' class? We pulled that all-nighter studying for the final." I searched my memory. No Mike Johnson registered. Professor Davies' class was notoriously dull, but I'd remember someone this effusive. "I'm sorry," I said politely, not taking his hand. "I don't seem to recall." "Ah, come on," he laughed, a booming sound that drew glances from nearby staff. "Don't tell me you forgot. We were study buddies." "Man, those were the days." He leaned in conspiratorially. "Say, heard you had a bit of rough patch after college? That tech startup that went belly up." "Tough break, man. And wasn't there something about some bad investments? Hope you landed on your feet." His voice carried. People nearby subtly angled their heads. This wasn't a friendly reminiscence. It was a public airing of perceived failures, delivered with faux sympathy. My mind instantly connected the dots. Jake's furious phone call Tyler had witnessed, the need to discredit me preemptively. This Mike Johnson was clearly hired actor, fed a distorted version of my past struggles. Jake wasn't just excluding me, he was trying to paint me as a bitter failure, someone whose potential observations about the groom should be dismissed. Instead of anger, a cold amusement settled over me. It was clumsy, desperate. "You must have me confused with someone else," I said calmly, my voice steady and low, refusing to engage on his terms. "I never took Professor Davies' class." Mike Johnson looked momentarily thrown off script. "Oh, maybe it was sociology then." "Long time ago, ha ha ha." "I don't think so," I replied, holding his gaze, letting the silence stretch. "Enjoy the wedding." He flushed slightly, the forced smile faltering. He mumbled something about catching up later and beat a hasty retreat, melting back into the crowd. Tyler, who had observed the exchange from a distance, caught my eye again and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He saw it too. Jake's clumsy attempt at character assassination had failed, but it revealed another layer of his paranoia, his need to control the narrative by any means necessary. He was worried about what I might know or what I might say. Good, let him worry. Feeling the lingering chill of the interaction, both the fake friend's attempt and the underlying coldness of my exile, I decided to retrieve my jacket from the cloakroom. Perhaps a layer against the mountain air drifting in from the terrace doors would help. The cloakroom attendant, a harried-looking woman juggling numbered tags and heavy coats, found my simple navy blazer quickly. As I slipped it on, my fingers brushed against something stiff in the inner breast pocket. Not my phone, not my wallet. An envelope. Puzzled, I pulled it out. It was plain white, unmarked, slightly thicker than expected. Where had this come from? I didn't remember putting anything there. Stepping back into the relative privacy of my alcove, I opened it. Inside wasn't junk mail or a misplaced hotel flyer. It was a sheaf of legal documents stapled together. The header read, "Prenuptial agreement between Jake Evans and Amelia Bennett." My breath hitched. A prenup. That wasn't entirely surprising given the Bennett wealth, but why was a copy in my jacket? Tucked within the pages was a smaller, folded piece of notepaper. The handwriting was familiar. Ben Bennett's elegant, slightly rushed script. "Dan, something feels wrong about all this." Jake insisted, pressured me really, into signing this yesterday. Said it was standard procedure, protection for us both, but the terms, they feel incredibly one-sided. I don't know who else to trust right now. Could you just keep this safe for me, just in case? Talk soon, B. The note wasn't dated, but the implication was clear. Ben had slipped this into my jacket sometime before today, perhaps during a brief encounter at a pre-wedding event, seeking a discreet safe harbor for his unease. And I hadn't noticed until now. My fingers tightened on the thick legal paper. I scanned the clauses quickly. Ben wasn't exaggerating. The terms were brutal. In case of dissolution, nearly all assets, current and future, acquired during the marriage would default to Jake. Ben waived rights to almost everything, including significant portions of his own inheritance if used for joint ventures managed by Jake. It wasn't protection, it was a financial snare designed to trap Ben and funnel Bennett wealth towards Jake under a veneer of legal legitimacy. This document, combined with Ben's fearful note and the overheard conversation with Linda, painted the full, ugly picture. Jake wasn't just marrying for money. He was executing a calculated financial takeover, preying on Ben's trust and affection. The minor financial embarrassments Jake had mentioned to Linda were likely the driving force behind this ruthlessly constructed agreement. I carefully folded Ben's note and the prenup, slipping them securely back into my inner pocket. This wasn't just Jake slighting his brother anymore. This was predatory. This was potentially criminal. And Ben himself had, perhaps unknowingly, just handed me the key evidence. The weight in my pocket felt heavier now. Not just paper, but responsibility. The ceremony itself took place on a grand stone terrace as twilight deepened, tiki torches casting flickering shadows against the darkening mountains. And string quartet played softly. The air was still, expectant. Jake stood at the makeshift altar, looking composed, handsome, the picture of eager devotion. Amelia, radiant in white, walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her expression serene. But as she reached the altar and took Jake's hands, I saw her smile tighten almost imperceptibly. The officiant began the rites, the familiar words washing over the assembled guests. When it came time for the vows, Jake delivered his smoothly, his voice resonant with practiced sincerity, promising love, honor, and partnership. Then it was Ben's turn. He took a deep breath, his knuckles white where he gripped Jake's hands. He began to speak, his voice slightly trembling. I, Benjamin Arthur Bennett. He faltered, his gaze flickering towards Jake. And in that split second, I saw it. Not just nervousness, not just the weight of the moment. It was a flash of genuine fear in Ben's eyes as he looked at the man he was about to marry. It was brief, instantly masked, but I saw it. He tried to continue. Take you, Jake Thomas Evans, to be my... His voice trailed off. He swayed slightly. His face, already pale, lost all color. He clutched his chest, his eyes wide with sudden panic or pain, and then, with a soft gasp that was swallowed by the sudden shocked silence of the crowd, he crumpled forward. Jake reacted quickly, catching Ben before he hit the stone floor, lowering him gently. Ben, what's wrong? He cried out, his voice laced with convincing panic. Chaos erupted. Amelia shrieked. Arthur Bennett rushed forward. Guests gasped and murmured. Someone shouted for a doctor. Luckily, several were present among the Bennett connections. As medical professionals quickly surrounded Ben, shielding him from view, administering aid, the diagnosis quickly circulated through the stunned crowd. An acute stress reaction, a panic attack, perhaps brought on by the pressure of the day. Plausible. Perfectly plausible. But I had seen that flicker of fear in Ben's eyes right before he collapsed. I had the note in my pocket expressing his unease, the prenup detailing Jake's financial chokehold, the recording of Jake dismissing Ben's concerns. Was this just stress? Or was it the culmination of intense, sustained pressure exerted by Jake, manifesting in a physical collapse at the most critical moment? Jake hovered nearby, looking distraught, wringing his hands, playing the part of the terrified fiancé perfectly. But beneath the performance, I sensed a cold calculation. Ben's collapse, while perhaps not directly engineered, served Jake's narrative, the poor, sensitive Ben, overwhelmed by the occasion. It deflected attention, created sympathy. And it conveniently halted the vows before Ben had to perjure himself further. My suspicions solidified into near certainty. This wasn't just stress. This was a consequence, manufactured or inevitable, of Jake's relentless manipulation. The reception resumed after Ben was stabilized and discreetly taken by ambulance to a local clinic for observation, accompanied by his anxious parents and a suitably distraught-looking Jake. A heavy, uncertain atmosphere settled over the grand hall. Music played softly, conversations were muted, and guests picked uneasily at their food. The festive facade had shattered. Our Aunt Martha, Dad's older sister, a woman known for her sharp tongue and unwavering sense of justice, sat at a table near mine, a placement likely deemed less important by Jake's seating chart logic, grouping her with distant cousins and me. Throughout the day, I'd caught her observing the proceedings with a growing frown, occasionally glancing towards my solitary post with narrowed eyes. Earlier, during a brief moment near the bar, we'd exchanged a few words. I hadn't poured out my suspicions, but I had commented dryly on the interesting seating arrangements and Jake's selective memory during the speeches. Her only reply had been a tight-lipped, "Some things never change, Daniel." But her eyes held a familiar spark of indignation on my behalf. Now, fueled perhaps by cheap Chardonnay, the shock of Ben's collapse, and a lifetime of witnessing perceived slights against me, she seemed to reach a breaking point. During a particularly awkward lull in the already subdued room, she pushed back her chair abruptly, strode purposefully towards the podium where the MC had stood earlier, and seized the microphone before anyone could react. "Excuse me," her voice boomed, startlingly loud in the quiet hall, silencing the string quartet mid-note. "Excuse me, everyone." All heads turned. My mother looked mortified. Distant relatives shifted nervously. "I know this isn't perhaps the ideal moment," Martha began, her voice trembling slightly with emotion but gaining strength, "with poor Ben unwell. But maybe it's exactly the moment to talk about family." She gripped the microphone stand, her knuckles white. "I've sat here today, like many of you, watching this performance. And I've seen my nephew, Daniel." She gestured towards me, making my presence undeniably known. "Treated like an afterthought. Shunted to the side, ignored in speeches, pushed out of photographs. Just like he's been treated his whole damn life since his father passed." A collective gasp went through the room. My mother's face paled. "We talk about supporting family," Martha continued, her voice rising. "But some families only support the son who shines brightest, the one who charms his way through life, while the steady one, the responsible one, the one who sacrificed his own dreams to hold things together after Greg died, well, he gets a seat by the coat check." Her gaze swept the room, challenging anyone to disagree. "Is this what the Evans family stands for now? Is this the kind of foundation this marriage," she gestured vaguely towards the empty space where Ben and Jake should have been, "is built upon? Ignoring inconvenient truths? Pretending everything is perfect while someone gets trampled?" Silence. Thick, uncomfortable silence. Guests avoided each other's eyes. Murmurs started near the back. Questions whispered. Long-held assumptions perhaps beginning to fray. Aunt Martha hadn't revealed Jake's darker secrets, but she had cracked the facade of familial harmony wide open, exposing the unfairness, the calculated cruelty Dan had endured. She had planted a seed of doubt, publicly questioning the very values the union was supposed to represent. She slammed the microphone back onto the stand, her chest heaving, and stalked back to her table, ignoring the stunned stares. The carefully controlled atmosphere of the Bennett-Evans wedding was irrevocably broken. In the stunned silence following Aunt Martha's dramatic exit from the podium, I felt an urge to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the hall, the weight of hundreds of suddenly curious or pitying eyes. I slipped out onto the now darkened West Terrace, the cool night air a welcome shock. Stars glittered fiercely in the ink-black sky, indifferent witnesses to the unfolding drama. Seeking a moment of genuine solitude, I walked to a quieter corner, away from the flickering torchlight spilling from the hall. I leaned against the cold stone balustrade, breathing deeply. My hand went instinctively to my wallet in my inner jacket pocket, a grounding gesture, checking for something solid and real amidst the chaos. As I pulled it out, fumbling slightly, a small, faded piece of paper slipped out from behind my driver's license, fluttering onto the dark flagstones. I almost didn't bother picking it up, assuming it was an old receipt. but something made me retrieve it. It wasn't a receipt. It was a note, folded small and worn soft with time. The handwriting was instantly recognizable, bold and slightly slanted. My father's. I couldn't even remember when he'd given it to me, or why I'd kept it tucked away for so long. I unfolded it carefully under the faint starlight. Just a few lines. Daniel, life will try to push you aside sometimes. Don't let it. You have my strength, son. Never, ever let anyone treat you as an afterthought. Stand your ground. Love. Dad tears pricked my eyes, hot and unexpected. Dad. He had seen it even then, the way Jake's charisma often overshadowed my quieter contributions, the way Mom sometimes inadvertently overlooked me in her focus on Jake. He had known the potential for me to be sidelined. Never let anyone treat you as an afterthought. Aunt Martha's words echoed his. The note felt like a direct message from the past, a validation and a call to action resonating across the years. My father hadn't just warned me, he'd told me to stand my ground. Passive observation, quiet collection of evidence, it wasn't enough anymore. Aunt Martha had cracked the facade publicly. Ben was hurt, trapped. My father's words demanded more. The truth needed not just to be known, but to be delivered. The cold resolve within me sharpened, no longer just about self-preservation or vindication, but about honoring my father's faith and exposing the rot before it consumed anyone else. It was time to act. My father's words still echoing in my mind, I felt a renewed sense of urgency. Just as I turned to head back towards the main hall, perhaps to find Tyler, my phone buzzed. It was him. Dan. Tyler's voice was low, urgent. Meet me. Private dining room, end of the east wing. Now. Something big. My heart rate quickened. On my way. The private dining room was small, opulent, and blessedly empty. Plush velvet chairs surrounded a dark mahogany table. Tyler was pacing near the window, his expression grim. Okay, what is it? I asked, closing the door behind me. After Martha's speech, things got weird, Tyler said, running a hand through his hair. People started talking, remembering things. And that prenup you mentioned Ben slipped you? Combined with Jake's earlier meltdown on the phone? It got me thinking, what's he really hiding? He stopped pacing and faced me. So I made a call to a buddy of mine who works in financial risk assessment, knows how to dig discreetly. I gave him Jake's name, asked him to run a check, purely speculative. Tyler took a deep breath. Dan, it's bad. Really bad. My buddy found traces, significant gambling debts, online poker sites, offshore accounts, markers called in. We're talking 6 figures, maybe more. Looks like he's been juggling them for years, getting deeper and deeper in the hole. Gambling debts, massive ones. Suddenly, the brutal prenup, the desperation in Jake's overheard conversation, the relentless pursuit of the Bennett fortune, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just garden-variety opportunism. This was the frantic scrabbling of a man drowning in secret debt, seeing the Bennett marriage not just as a springboard, but as a lifeline, his only lifeline. Ben wasn't just collateral. He was the unwitting rescuer Jake planned to financially exploit and likely discard once his debts were cleared. So the minor financial embarrassments. I trailed off, remembering Jake's words to Linda, are probably a mountain of gambling debt he thought he could bury under Bennett money. Tyler finished grimly. He wasn't just marrying for a better life, Danny. He was marrying to avoid total ruin. That kind of desperation, it explains a lot, including maybe why Ben looked so damn scared. The picture was complete now, darker and more predatory than I could have imagined. Jake wasn't just flawed, he was dangerous, driven by a desperate secret. Knowing this changed everything. It wasn't enough to just expose the lie of the marriage. The depth of his deception, the reason for it, had to come out. As the weight of Jake's gambling debts settled upon us in the quiet dining room, Tyler's expression grew even graver. "There's more, Dan," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, innocuous-looking USB flash drive. "Ben gave this to me 3 days ago." My eyes locked onto the drive. "Ben gave it to you?" "Yeah," Tyler confirmed. "He was acting strange all week, really stressed, jumpy. Kept saying Jake was putting insane pressure on him about wedding details and future plans. Then, the day before yesterday, he pulled me aside, looked absolutely terrified, and gave me this." Tyler held up the drive. "He made me promise, not to tell anyone, especially not Jake or his own parents, unless something happened. He said, if I seem not myself, or if things go really wrong, give this to Dan. Only Dan. He'll know what to do." My throat felt tight. Ben had known on some level that he was in danger. He had sensed the wrongness, the pressure, the potential for things to unravel, and he had prepared. He had trusted me, the sidelined brother, the afterthought, to be his fail-safe. "What's on it?" I asked, my voice rough. "Recordings," Tyler said grimly. Ben started secretly recording some of his conversations with Jake on his phone over the last couple of weeks. When Jake was pressuring him about the prenup, when he was dismissing Ben's concerns, when he was outlining these grandiose business plans that Ben felt uncomfortable with. Ben said he felt crazy doing it, but also felt he needed proof that he wasn't just imagining Jake's intensity. Tyler handed me the USB drive. It felt strangely heavy in my palm. Irrefutable proof. First-hand evidence provided by Ben himself, detailing Jake's manipulation in his own words. The conversation I'd overheard with Linda was just the tip of the iceberg. "Ben knew," I murmured, shaking my head slightly. "He knew something was fundamentally wrong, and he was scared enough to do this." "Yeah," Tyler said quietly. "And seeing him collapse today, I knew it was time to give this to you. If things go really wrong," he said. Well, they did. Holding the drive, the pieces clicked into their final damning alignment. The exclusion, the overheard plan, the fake friend, the brutal prenup, Ben's fear-filled note, the collapse, the gambling debts, and now, recordings of Jake's own manipulative words. I had everything. The only question left was how to deploy it for maximum undeniable impact, not for my own revenge, but for the truth Ben deserved, and perhaps needed for his own protection. Just as Tyler and I were absorbing the finality of the recordings, the muffled sounds of commotion drifted in from the main hall. Raised voices, a woman's sharp tone cutting through the general murmur. "What now?" Tyler muttered, heading for the door. I followed, the USB drive clutched tightly in my hand. We emerged into the hallway just as several guests spilled out of the banquet hall, their faces a mixture of shock and avid curiosity. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Aunt Martha's earlier outburst had cracked the veneer. Now, something else was shattering it completely. Standing near the entrance, directly confronting a pale and visibly shaken Jake, who must have returned from the clinic, was a woman I didn't recognize. She was perhaps in her late 30s, dressed elegantly but with fire in her eyes, her voice clear and ringing with fury. Several guests, including Jake's stunned mother, formed a loose, silent circle around them. "Lied about everything," the woman was saying, her voice trembling but strong. "The investments, the future together, even your damned name." "You weren't Jake Evans then, were you? You were Jason Edwards, promising me the world. Jake stammered. I don't know who you are. You're mistaken. Security. Mistaken? The woman laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Oh, I'm not mistaken, Jake, or Jason, or whatever name you're using this week. I remember every lie. I remember the seed money I gave you from my inheritance, almost $50,000, for that can't-miss venture that vanished along with you. 50,000. Another debt. Another deception. Tyler shot me a look. While he'd been digging into Jake's gambling, he'd stumbled upon rumors of past romantic scams and tracked this woman down, alerting her to Jake's wedding today. He had, in his own quiet way, helped set this stage. You prey on people, the woman cried, tears finally spilling, smudging her mascara. You find someone trusting, you build a fantasy, you take everything, and then you disappear. You did it to me, and God knows who else. And now you're doing it again, aren't you? She gestured towards the empty space at the head table where Ben should have been. This poor boy and his family? Are they just your next mark? The crowd murmured, shifting uncomfortably. Aunt Martha's accusations about Jake's character suddenly seemed less like family squabbling and more like prophetic warning. This woman's raw, personal testimony, naming specific lies and stolen money, was devastating. It painted Jake not just as manipulative, but as a serial predator. Jake looked wildly around, trapped, his charming facade completely gone, replaced by raw panic. He opened his mouth, but no excuses, no denials seemed possible against the raw, emotional power of the woman's accusation. My mother looked utterly broken, staring at Jake as if seeing a monster for the first time. Even the Bennett relatives, usually so composed, looked horrified. The few remaining shreds of doubt about Jake's true nature evaporated in the face of this public, damning exposé from his past. The crowd, which had earlier offered polite applause, now stared at him with undisguised contempt and disbelief. His social execution was complete. The hall descended into a maelstrom of shocked whispers, accusations, and Jake's increasingly frantic, incoherent denials. His mother was weeping openly. The Bennetts stood frozen, their faces masks of icy fury and utter humiliation. The wedding, the carefully crafted union of wealth and ambition, had imploded in the most public and ruinous way possible. Amidst this chaos, I felt a strange sense of calm descend. My purpose was clear. There was nothing left for me here. No confrontation needed. No angry words to exchange. The truth, raw and undeniable, was out, tearing through the illusion Jake had so meticulously constructed. Quietly, deliberately, I retrieved my jacket, the same one that had held Ben's desperate plea. I nodded briefly to Tyler, who stood watching the unfolding disaster with a grim sort of satisfaction. He understood. Then, I approached him, pressing the sealed envelope into his hand. It wasn't addressed to Jake, or my mother, or even the wedding guests. It was addressed simply, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Bennett. Inside, I had placed copies of the brutal prenup, the printouts confirming Jake's gambling debts that Tyler had procured, and the USB drive containing Ben's recordings. Included was a single sheet of paper, not accusatory, not emotional, just a brief factual summary. A timeline of events, evidence enclosed for your review, provided out of concern for Ben's well-being. Make sure they get this, I murmured to Tyler, low enough not to be overheard in the din. When things calm down, it's for Ben. Tyler nodded, understanding immediately. Deliver the cold, hard facts to the people with the power to act, the ones most directly harmed by Jake's deception after Ben himself. Let the evidence speak for itself. With that final act completed, I turned away from the wreckage of my brother's life the shattered remnants of the wedding scattered like confetti around him. I didn't look at Jake, didn't look at my distraught mother. Their drama was no longer mine to participate in. I walked out of the grand hall, past the now ignored cloakroom, through the opulent lobby, and out into the crisp, indifferent aspen night. My heels clicked softly on the flagstone path leading away from the lodge. No shouting, no tears, no dramatic pronouncements, just a quiet departure, leaving the undeniable truth behind to do its work. My father's words echoed one last time. Stand your ground. I had, not by engaging in Jake's games, but by ensuring the truth had its own platform. Revenge, I thought, glancing back one last time at the chaotic lights of the lodge, wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was best served cold, delivered with precision, leaving the guilty to drown in the consequences of their own actions. And as I drove away, down the dark mountain road, I felt not triumph, but a quiet, profound sense of release. I was finally free,